Okay, there we go. So we're recording now. So thanks again for joining. So this webinar, I think entitled sort of maximizing the value of your glide system, really is designed, I suppose, with a couple of people in mind. I know we've got lots of customers who've been using their glide system for years and years. And, we've added new things and, it's going to be an opportunity just to talk about some of those. And there might be opportunities for you to go away and implement those things in your workflow systems. I know we've got some sort of prospects, people considering the glide system registered. So for those people, I suppose it's just a bit of an insight into how the system works, in a way that isn't just a demonstration of the system. So hopefully there'll be something of use for everyone there. I've not really planned this massively. I've got a list of about 20 things that I'd like to mention, really just to explain the concepts and what you would do, not to spend forever going through the nitty-gritty of how to do things. We'll potentially do more webinars that go into more detail, or of course the glide team's always here to help. If you want to implement something, just get in touch. But today's trying to cover as many bases as possible. I think we've got 1 hour, so 57 minutes remaining, and yeah, we're going to just sort of talk about as many of these as I can sort of cram in to the session. Now, broad topics are really focused on what I'd consider the basics, the bread and butter of setting up glide really well. So we'll talk a little bit about what workflows you might have. And then for any one workflow, we'll talk about, are your stages sort of optimized, your steps, the steps being the little blue buttons that nudge your jobs on. I want to talk about the concept of the job holder. I'm going to talk about target dates, dashboards, and then a little bit about email automation. Obviously, we did a webinar on that last week or a couple of weeks ago, which I know some of you are at. I haven't yet put that on our YouTube, so I will be doing so soon. So I won't duplicate that one heavily, but we will talk a little bit about it. So yeah, we're not really going into the madly complicated stuff. This is all about having the basics set up well, and hopefully that's gonna, have an impact on day-to-day, how useful the system is for your team. Okay, right, so without further ado, let me share my screen. Here we go. So I'm sharing my Chrome screen. I'm logged into Glide. But the first thing I was going to talk about was really workflow systems, because, when I'm helping some of our customers that have used Glide for maybe, 5, 6, 7 years or whatever, one of the first opportunities I always think of when they say, well, what else can I do, is actually to have more workflow systems. Now, I won't sort of bore you by going through a whole list now, but we had a think the other day, and I think that we have sort of assisted people setting up almost 100 different things as workflows. I'm going to do a blog on this very soon, so that'll be where I put literally a list of these. So do keep an eye out for that. If you are subscribed to our blog, you'll get an email. If you're not, you can easily find that on our website. But that is one big opportunity. When we're implementing Glide with new customers now, I mean, sometimes there's a very specific person or team or department or office that are doing it, but if it's the entire business, we're trying to create that situation where we've got all of your work covered, all those compliance flows, advisory, back office, onboarding, offboarding, even some just fully automated flows that sort of happen in the background. We're trying to get them all. And that really does create a nice situation whereby, supposing you are sort of director, partner, some sort of manager in the business, if you're thinking, well, what's going on with this? Where is that up to? It doesn't matter what it is, straight to Glide, there is your answers. So certainly having that broadness to the number of workflows you've got, sort of clicking the workflows here, you see what you've got set up, is a good idea. But like I say, blog to follow on that, so I won't go mad on that in today's webinar. So the first thing I want to talk about is stages of a workflow. How do you know if you've got not enough, too many, that sort of a thing? First of all, just to explain really what you should be aiming for here, I've got an example sort of workflow here, and the stages, of course, are my blue rectangles. We really want, from the earliest moment, this job should be even close to being thought about. And what do I mean by that? Well, taking maybe a year-end accounts or a year-end audit, in my opinion, that job should be creating automatically maybe 60 or 90 days before the year end. Supposing the first task is a pre-year end phone call that might want to happen 30 days pre-year end, we want to be giving whoever is doing that another sort of 30, 40 days to see it coming on their dashboard and see it coming closer to them. So from that very moment until everything is done, and that's obviously the green bit at the bottom here, completed, we are interested in stages that really reflect the big picture milestones of progress. Have we started? Is it with the client to get the info in? Are we in the reviews? Are we finalizing? It's those big picture ones. We're not really looking in here to have a load of stages that say, yes, I've agreed the debtors, or yes, I've reconciled the bank, or whatever it might be. You can incorporate those in job fields, which I mentioned later on, a bit more detail. But generally speaking here, to have a very defined process diagram, we are navigating the job through the big picture sort of stages, let's say. So with that in mind, I would say to people, keep it as simple as possible. But if something might happen in reality, you need to have a button, a stage to track it, because then Glide is tracking your jobs no matter what happens. So anything that might reasonably happen a few times a year probably should be catered for in the workflow. Okay. Now, there's sort of 5 bullet points I've got on my notes here to sort of add a bit more detail to that. The first one is, reflect reality, capture data on interactions with clients and internally. So wherever there's an interaction between you and the practice and the client, or internally between departments, it is great to have a little button on your job card to record that. So, obviously that's why in all my templates, we do incorporate sort of requesting info, chasing info, even though it's not progressing the job, is great to have there, because that is data that you are building up. Again, even thinking internally, maybe we're waiting on ourselves to do some accounts or some dividend numbers. Let's record that, and then the Glide job card becomes a complete picture of what happened and when and why, and those sorts of things. So my next example of why you might want a couple more stages than you might have at the moment is to give more detail on the progress monitors. So if I just jump onto a dashboard, so here I've got a personal tax dashboard. In this system, I've got 2 versions of personal tax, version 1, version 2. And I'm looking here at my list of stages. Now, I could do this with just to request info, awaiting info, ready to start, in progress, first review, second review. So lots of these: awaiting info, manual chasing, in progress, those 3, clear review points. They could all feasibly be missed. So why have I got them in there? Well, I've put them in so that if anyone in the practice wants to know what's going on, when they look at their dashboard and when they look at this view, they get more detail than they would get without those stages, and that detail is useful. So to jump on the example of in progress, and let's just find, I think somewhere I've got this open. Here we go. So here is the workflow behind this. When we get to the stage in progress, of course, you have to have one step. You're going to have something like pass for review, or maybe if you don't have a review, it's just sent to client, whatever, or maybe you have both of those. You've got a step that means progress, we're moving on. And you could leave it at that. But what I find happens then is that when people are looking at this dashboard, they're just seeing in progress. And for things like year-end accounts and tax returns, at busy times, you might be seeing 20, 30, 40, 100 jobs in there. Not very helpful. So that's why I always encourage people to have these steps, which say again, there is an interaction internally or externally. We've sent some queries to the client. We've requested missing info. We're waiting on accounts prep, whatever it might be. By clicking those buttons, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to find a job. No, that one's gone. Where's my job? Here it is. I'm just going to find a job here and get down to that stage. Bear with me a couple of seconds. I've tried to set things up for this webinar, but we're going to have to spend a bit of time just walking through jobs. Here we go. So in progress. So what this means is, you know, the user that's sending the queries to the client, they can just click that. And then if you are, let's say, you know, the manager, the partner, director on that one, you're suddenly seeing a bit more detail. In progress queries with client 1. Of course, you wouldn't just have a 1, you'd have loads of numbers and you'd drill in and you'd see there it is. And then you can jump into the job card. And it might be that, of course, you've got the fact that it's gone to queries your client there. It might be that you've got a useful team member who's put a little note on that stage. So for me, that is a really useful, where's my diagram gone? Yeah, a really useful way of capturing more actual dates, encouraging more notes, and just giving more detail on the dashboard. So that's my first reason why I would encourage more stages. And of course, in a perfect world, you don't need any of them. You don't go through them. But if things go, you know, not to plan A, if you do have queries and missing info, the whole idea is that Glide is never losing track of that job. And even if it goes mad and you loop through missing info 10 times, we're never losing track of the job. So that's the first one. And there are other examples there. So if you do have reviews in your workflows, then what we'll often have, let's find the diagram again, what we'll often have on a review, so waiting review, I've got 2 here, which, you know, perhaps I'm going a bit mad, but on a waiting first review, there'll always be 2 options, won't there? Either it's great and we've moved on to whatever comes next, or we've got review points. Now, a while back, I would have just had the review points going back to in progress, because that kind of works as well, right? But nowadays, I tend to say, well, have that go into a dedicated stage, you know, from where the points are cleared and it goes back to the review and hopefully then gets signed off or goes through review points again. And again, the reason for that is simple, that when I'm looking at my portfolio of my clients, rather than seeing more and more and more jobs in progress, I'm actually seeing, okay, these ones didn't get through the review. They're sat there with the review points to clear. Okay, and another one up here, you know, this, I'll talk about this a bit later, but awaiting information, you know, that if you're using our email to do automated chasers, I always say at some point, just stop that and get the last automated one to nudge the job on. So I've got that here, I think. Yeah, so I've got my automated emails chasing, clicking a button when they've sent the email to record that they've chased it, so you get an actual date on your job card. But then the last one pushes the job onto a manual chasing stage. And the reason for that, again, is simple. When I'm looking at my portfolio of jobs or clients, I can look at those and think, okay, yes, we've got X number of jobs in there, but they're being chased automatically. If I see a number creeping into here, I think, okay, that's on me. And of course, it might be that as a director, a manager, a preparer seeing that, and as we'll come on to talk about later, if I'm the one that needs to do it, it will be in my jobs held. So that's another example where a couple of stages is helpful. Okay, my next reason for having more stages than you might otherwise have had is to facilitate email automation. And what I mean by that is that we might have some jobs that need an email and some that don't. So let's have a look at my VAT here. Have I got this set up? Yes, I have. Great. Okay, so what I've got here is I've got to submit to HMRC, and I've got, you know, if we've got a lot of options at this stage. Whoops, let me just grab a job on our VAT. Let's go for this one. Okay, so I'm going to shoot down here as quick as I can. Bear with me. Going to get this down to the stage that we're talking about. Approved by client. Great. Okay, so I have got different options here. So we've got submitted no balance or refund due. Yeah, basically a nil return. That'll just complete the job. We've got refund, you know, that just completes the job, I think. Refund, yep, you know, because we don't need to do anything else there. Yeah, of course, you might want a stage to chase it up, but whatever. We've then got 3 that reflect the balance being due. Now, some of that, there's 3 because I've got 3 different email templates, but I just want to mention on this one manual payment, because what I've got there is if I click manual payment, only that button goes onto a stage, send payment reminder. So if they're paying by direct debit, I'm just happy to finish the job. And the reason I do this then, why have I parked some ones here? I mean, I guess it's pretty obvious. The clue is in the stage name. What I then have is I have an email alert set up on VAT payment deadline -2 working days or whatever you like to send the reminder. And I send it to all jobs that are on that stage. And that guarantees to me that it's only going to jobs that need the reminder. I'm not going to be sending it out to people that have got a refund or no balance or pay by direct debit. So there's an example where having a stage rather than not having a stage suddenly becomes useful. It's acting as the filter for my email automation. The final reason then why you might want another stage, let's try and find a dash. I've got so many tabs open here. Let's jump back on here, is maybe a stage means someone is responsible for those jobs and they can look at that row and click it. But don't overthink that one, because of course later on we're going to talk about the job holder, and officially it is the job holder that tells people these are the jobs you specifically need to take action on. But every so often it will just so happen that someone or a team of people do all the jobs on a stage, and therefore having that stage can be another useful way for them to visually see and navigate to their jobs. Okay, so that is my 4 or 5, whatever it was, reasons why you might want another stage or more stages. But of course, what we've not got here is like a really granular list of things we're doing, like, tick the bank, do this, do that, do the other. They can be incorporated as job fields. I wasn't planning to talk too much about job fields today, but just as a reminder, they sort of appear down here. It can be a nice way to create a mini sort of checklist, and also they can become mandatory at any point in your flow. Every so often a workflow does work by having those sorts of things in it. Maybe things like daily bookkeeping, where it's like do the Dext or receipt bank or whatever, do the 0, done. That would work, but you wouldn't want those to take over on a big job from the more important sort of milestones. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about then is, it's going to be a bit of overlap with what we've just said, but it's the steps. Okay, so what gets us from one stage to the next is our steps. On your diagrams, they are gray. On your job cards, they are blue. Apologies for making them sort of the wrong colors when we first did this, but the steps, move your job on either to the next stage or backwards or overlapping or looping or going down different branches. They are probably, in my opinion, the most important thing in Glide. So again, thinking of a long-term customers that have workflows that maybe we helped them with 5-6 years ago, if you're just seeing one blue button at every stage to move on, you're probably missing some tricks there. And hopefully some of the ideas I'm about to go through will, reveal some good ideas for these steps. Okay, so why? Obviously, bare minimum is 1 step per stage, so you can move on, and your diagram would just be a straight line, a purely linear flow. Occasionally, that is totally fine. If that is the reality, that's absolutely fine to have it set up like that. But more often than not, the reality is that when a job is on a certain stage, there is quite simply more than one thing that might happen at that point in time. And we need 1 step for every possible thing that might happen at that point in time. Okay. Within reason. We don't need a step at every single stage to say that the client's just sort of died or so. We're thinking of things that will reasonably happen, a few times a year. And it only needs to be a few. Even if it's something quite obscure, we still want Glide to be able to track it, because we don't want the system to fall down because something a bit out of the ordinary has happened. We should factor that into our workflow. Okay, now, first thing to mention is that just the possibility of having more than one, the first important thing it does, and I'm sat on a not the best example stage here. What I might do on Graham here is just create the next VAT return job. Obviously, this happens automatically in real life. I'm just going to create one there just so we're back on our first stage. The first thing that having more than one button does is it makes this dead easy for the team. You know, when we implement Glide, the training, the message to the team is, look, all you need to do is when something happens, click the blue button. It should be just subliminal. They don't even think about it. It's a very passive, easy thing to do. That's certainly the feedback we get from people that use the system, that you know, even some of the bad offenders of not keeping things up to date can just click these buttons. They kind of suck you in. And one of the reasons why I think that does work is because you can have more than one. It eliminates all of that gray area of, oh, you know, if we were just marking the stage off, when do you tick that stage? Or what about if this has happened? Do you tick it then or do you wait? And we don't want to create this sort of friction and confusion and gray areas. So keeping Glide up to date is as simple as come to the job card, it will be on the correct stage. Anything that might have possibly happened will be a blue button. And it's really important for getting the system to be really up to date. Okay, so I've now got sort of 4, I think, examples of why you might have more than one blue button, more than one step on your diagram. So first of all, and one of these I think will overlap with the stages we were just talking about, but first of all, you might want more detail in your actual dates. I've got an example of this on my personal tax. Here it is. So let's find one of these jobs. Just bear with me a second. Here we go. We're on one. Great. Again, I'm kind of too far down the job to show you what I want to show you. So I'm just going to create a new one. Bear with me. Okay. So on a stage, let's say we've requested the info and we're on awaiting information. Whenever you click a blue button on the stage, you'll get an actual date. And this is really useful because it might be that down the line, maybe you file this sort of last minute and the client phones up and says, look, why are you putting me through this stress? Why are we filing this last minute? And what's really useful, again, and this is sort of when you've got all your workflows covered, is anyone knows, right, I go to the job card, I'll get the answer to that question. And having those chase buttons, even though they go nowhere, is great because they put an actual date in, okay? So you can easily look in here and go, okay, Mr. or Mrs. Client, you know, we actually chased you twice, so this is totally your fault. Don't do that again. And having more buttons gives you more detail in here because this is the button name, if you like. So rather than just having chased here, I've got chased phone, chased email. You can have as many of those as you like, and you're seeing it here. And we still want the team members to put a little note in here to be super helpful. But by having more buttons, we're sort of doing that for them a bit, aren't we? We're getting a bit more information in here. So that's one example. We want more detail in the actual date data. The next one is a pretty obvious one, I guess, is that we want the buttons to go to a different stage. So this will happen a lot. So like we were talking about the in progress, you know, we've got these different ones. Rather than just popping a different label in the actual date, we are actually progressing the job to different stages. Of course, that was to make the dashboard thing really useful and detailed. And it was also potentially to facilitate email automation. If we want to chase up these queries, we've actually ring-fenced them on one stage. So that becomes really easy. And of course, this is the one that overlaps. To do a different stage, you need a different button because a button goes to one place. So I guess that one's pretty obvious. And anything that's like approval or review is always going to have a minimum of 2, where either like here, approved for client release or review points. So of course, there we need more than one button because it has an implication for where the job should go in the diagram. So that one's probably quite straightforward. The next example, yeah, okay. The next example I've accidentally talked about already. So whereas this was sort of progressing, some of our buttons, where we have 2 buttons, might progress to just totally different parts of the diagram. So a good example might be, and I don't have it here today, but on in progress or ready to start, rather than job started, we might have job started dash internal, which comes down this side of the screen. And we might have job started dash sent to outsourcer. Now, taking that decision might send the jobs down totally different branches, and then they rejoin at the end for finalization. So that's one. And then the other scenario is more like the one I was talking about a moment ago, where ultimately we're always going to progress through this stage in through the positive step, but other buttons allow us to sort of temporarily visit other stages, which we then loop back from. And I guess it's similar with the review points. We're not going off on a wildly different branch here. We're just spending a bit of time in this stage and then we come back. So those two are pretty similar. The fourth and final one then is that these steps might trigger different actions. Okay, and I'll show you how we do that here. So for example, let me find that VAT job I had a second ago. Here it is. A good example of triggering different actions. The first one I've got is we might send different email templates or send the same or different templates to different people, depending on what button you click. So let's get Graham's VAT job right the way down to filing. Okay. Go for review. Okay. Okay, great. So to submit to HMRC, lots of glide systems will have one button here, submitted. And that's totally fine, of course. I've got 4, as we were talking about this a moment ago, because the manual payment goes to a different stage. That's one reason why I have these. But also these top 3 buttons will send an email to my client. And I need 3 because I've got 3 templates. I've got a template for a refund. Obviously, that's saying you're going to get X amount of cash back. And I've got 2 templates for a balance. One of them is where I know the client pays by direct debit. That's saying, look, you owe X. Don't worry. Our records suggest you have a direct debit in place. If this is not the case anymore, here's how you pay. The manual payment one is saying, here's what you owe. By the way, you actually need to pay it by this date, and here's how you pay it. Probably a link to the HMRC pay your bill page. So yeah, those 3 buttons, they're actually going, some of them are going to the same stage. Okay, the manual payment one isn't, but they're doing different things. They're triggering different emails. And the other nice thing about that is that I can then put what we call traffic lights in place to actually insist we populate the fields that I'm going to merge in. So if I fill in my VAT liability field, I'm then, okay, Graham hasn't, I'm going to allow, once you've filled in VAT liability, I'm going to allow you to click the balance due, manual or direct debit, but I am also only going to allow you to click one based upon whether what this field is set to, DD in place for payment. So let's say we have got a direct debit in place there. Okay, so now I'm allowed to click the paid by direct debit one. So, there's an example there of workflow actions being different on different buttons. First of all, I'm blocking based on different data. So I'm only allowing you to click this one if you've filled in the liability and we know you pay a direct debit. Then when you click it, I'm sending a different email template. So that is a good example of, different buttons might go to the same place, but they're doing different things. The next one is you might change the job holder to someone different. Now, we're going to talk about job holder in a moment, so I won't go into too much detail here, but let's say that we've got, what have we got? Let's say we've got to send for approval. So we've just got one button here, sent to client for approval. Now, the job might be held by the manager at this point, and it might not change. So on awaiting client approval, it's still held by the manager. What if you wanted to give your team the ability to say, I've sent it and I want the director to chase up this approval rather than me? You can just have another button called like sent for approval, give job to director. Might run out of room there. I just got it in. Okay, no, we're missing. Sent for approval, give job to director. So that one is going to go from the same place to the same place. Okay, we'll hit save there. So we've got 2 now. But on this one, if I just find it to do our actions, we just scroll down to the bottom. Here is just a list of all of our steps. So we can see there that that was the submit to HMRC ones we had that were blocking on different things and sending different emails. If we just find here we go. Sent to client for approval is doing nothing, just changing the stage. Sent for approval, give job to director. We could say on this one, right, if you click that one, set the job holder to be, I've called it partner in here, the partner. So there's an example where two buttons are going to exactly the same place and they just have a different action, in this case, to set the job holder to someone different. And another example of that might be setting a different target date. And again, I'm going to come on to target dates, but you know, where we've got info chased here, you might have one that says info chased, chase again in 7 days. And you might have one that says info chase, chase again in a month. And they would just have a different target date action on them, you know, so that's another example. Okay, so that's enough of talking about steps. You know, of course, one I mentioned early on is that they might go to different stages, and that's probably the key one. You know, say if you have dormant accounts in your main accounts workflow, you might want a shortcut to shoot these dormant accounts through a bit quicker, and that would be easily achieved. You might block that unless a client field is set to dormant or something like that. Okay, the next sort of broad topic I want to talk about, again, it's a real bread and butter basic thing in Glide, but it's something that I know some of our customers probably don't use, so I really want to cover it, is the job holder. This is really, you know, sort of useful for taking Glide to the next level. So let's go back to one of our dashboards, like this personal tax dashboard here. You might, on your jobs, I'm just going to open up, oops, there we go. Just going to open up a job card on the next page. You might have lots of people linked to a job. Okay, and just to recap why that's important, on a dashboard, and I'm going to talk about dashboards later, so again, I'm sort of dipping into the later part of the webinar here, but if you have a widget set to overall, you're just seeing everything. If you are the practice manager, the owner, you might well want all of your widgets or some of them or some of your dashboards set to overall. That's fine. I know that most people have most of their widgets set to linked because it's really useful, especially when you have a team, and quite simply, most people are not interested in everything. They're interested in things that they are either involved in or have some degree of responsibility over. So maybe they're the client director, client manager, or a particular service manager, and they might be responsible for oversight of VAT or something. So what we do is we have job positions. You have as many as you like, you call them what you like. You know, if you're sat there with my typical partner manager preparer and you're thinking, well, actually we have director and a reviewer, that can all be configured. And people will come in here either automatically because we know who it is, or manually because you allocate it during the job. If they're in there, they are linked. So sticking with my example of 3 job positions, you know, we might have 3 people where if they have their stages widget set to linked, they're all going to see the job. So a job, maybe that year-end job creates 60 days before the year end. The director comes in that morning, sees it's there. The manager comes in, sees it's there. If it's already allocated, the preparer sees it's there. Again, upcoming targets, if that's set to linked, that all 3 of those people are seeing, right, we want to be doing a pre-year end contact at least 30 days pre-year end. The jobs held is different. Only the job holder will see the job in their jobs held widget. So that depends how you've configured your flow. If you're saying on job creation, set the job holder to the manager for that first stage, only the manager will see the job in there. And it sort of confirms that whilst lots of widgets give people oversight and transparency on anything they're remotely interested in, the jobs held should be the widget that is saying things in here need to be done by you. This is like your Glide to-do list effectively, and we order them by next target date, which I'll be talking about in a bit. If you do your dashboards, how I do sort of overall summary and then various service specific ones, you have an overall jobs held that's got everything you need to do, and you can have ones that are more service specific as well. So again, coming back to thinking about stages and steps, one reason, and I think we said this earlier, one reason why you might have a different stage or maybe just a step is that it reflects a change in the job holder, and we want to be able to automate that rather than change it. Of course, that's fundamentally why we have things like the review. You know, although it's nice to know that the job has got to that stage, Another reason is that when we click the pass for review, we're probably going to change the job holder to the manager or the reviewer, whoever it might be. And okay, so what's the name of the game with the job holder? It is, as I say, the person that should be doing the current stage. And it's only one person per job, unless you've got multiple job components set up, which I wasn't planning on talking about today, but like on a year-end account, you could have a job holder for accounts, job holder for CT, that sort of thing. But fundamentally, it's one person per job. It means that if a client phones up and says to a receptionist, I want to chat to someone about my VAT, you could in theory see exactly who has got it on their desk and route the call to them. I guess you might also just think, well, I know who the client manager is or the partner, whatever. It also allows you to see how busy people are. Screens like the jobs held board, this is putting jobs below people to convey a sense of how busy they are. And of course, we can't put this job below 3 people because there's a partner, manager, director. That's misleading. Only one person is probably doing that stage at a time. So that's useful for the job holder as well. So top tips for using the job holder effectively. The first tip is, generally speaking, we probably want to ensure there is always a job holder. We don't want it to be empty, okay? Sometimes you might want it to be empty, but that would be very much by your choice, by design. Perhaps an example I'm thinking of there is on the 5th of April, when so many thousand tax return jobs are created. Maybe you don't want anyone to be holding them because you're going to be chasing them automatically, whatever. You don't want people's jobs held widget to suddenly have 1,000 jobs in it. That might be the exemptions. But what we don't want to happen is the job to kind of go for review and there's no job holder. So I've got a couple of tips to share with you over how we avoid that. And it's all to do with these workflow actions. Let's look at this as an example, VAT. So scroll down to the bottom, find our workflow steps. And on the steps, you have the actions. Now, how do you ensure that? Let's assume on this VAT job, and I think this would be the case in reality, we always want a job holder. Well, the way you do it on the creation step, now remember the job creation for a recurring job, this is going to happen automatically at 3 a.m. So how do we get that to find someone? Well, you most probably do an action saying set job holder to something like the manager, the preparer, the partner, whatever. And that's quite possibly going to find someone, because if that job position, the job positions will set automatically on job creation as well. And things like partner, manager will pull their value from the client record. The preparer, if you've linked it to a client field, will also pull the value from there. But of course, if you set it to the preparer and you haven't allocated someone, there's a risk that could be blank. So what you then do on the job creation step is you do an action that says set job holder if empty, okay? And you wouldn't choose nobody. You could choose another position and try that position. But ultimately, if you want to guarantee, so you can have multiple of these, if you want to guarantee as a job holder, at some point you have to choose a real person or a real team or the pool, because those choices will always work. There's never a risk that they will be empty like a position could be. So that's how you do it on job creation. When you get to a later stage, so let's say when we are, I'm just going to delete something there. When we're clicking this info received button, let's say we want to set the job holder to the preparer position. Because this is an actual button that a user will click, we actually have 2 choices now for how we do this. We can do the same as we did earlier. So we might say, right, give this to the preparer. If it's then empty, well, that basically means if there isn't a preparer set, we'll put it in the pool. So that would work. That's a popular way of doing it. We're sort of saying, okay, if we've allocated this one, so either if it was pre-allocated on the client record, or if we happen to have allocated it, after the job's created and before the info is received, it will give it to the preparer. And then only if we haven't set the preparer, put it in the pool. That's option 1. Option 2 is to not do that bit and instead to have an action that says traffic light, field completed, you must tell me who the preparer is. So if we now go and find a VAT job, must have one open somewhere. Okay, we've finished that one. Let's create the next one for Graham. Obviously, you don't need to create these things in reality. They create themselves, but just for the benefit of today. So we crucially, okay, we've got a preparer. let's go back, and I want to simulate a scenario where there isn't a preparer. So let me just save that. Cool. Okay, much better. Cool. So we've now got a situation where there isn't a preparer. Give me 1 second just to go in and check something. I just noticed might not be quite right. I'm always messing around with my demo system. Okay, no, that looks good. That looks good. Okay, back to Graham. Where's he gone? So let's get a job to that stage. September 23, info requested. Okay, so info received was the step that I was just tweaking. And what I've done here is I've said, I know I'm going to set my job holder to the preparer. So I've put a traffic light in to say, you've got to tell me who the preparer is. And what I did there was I just manually selected someone, and that person is now a preparer, and it's now going to let me hit info received. So when you're not on your creation step, but on any other step, you've got a user sat here clicking them, so you can put those traffic lights in. That's one way of doing it. So I click info received, it goes to my preparer. Okay. Now, there's other options, other ways of doing that. So what you could do, great, we found another example here. So I'm in progress. I want to click pass for review. I've got a reviewer position. It's currently empty. So currently I'm doing, please tell me who the reviewer is. And if the person that wants to click that button knows who the reviewer is, that's fine, because they can come and tell you. But what if it's not really their problem? We don't want to discourage them from real-time updating that they've finished and something's ready for review. So we would want to configure that differently. Let's just find where we were. Pass for review. So as you can see, currently I'm blocking if the review is not filled in. What I could do instead is a bit similar to the other example we had. I could say set the job holder to the reviewer, and then I could say, if it's empty, set the job holder. And we could have, I've got green, blue, and admin. We could have a team called VAT reviewers. That would be fine. So just to come back here, let's refresh that. So we've no longer got the traffic light in. There's no reviewer. So when we click pass for review, we've set the holder to the blue hub, but I would perhaps have a team called VAT reviewers or reviewers. And anyone in that team on their dashboard, we'll talk about this in a bit, would have a widget to say, here's all the jobs held by the team. And what you then typically do is on the awaiting review stage, let's find that one here, you'd probably have a button that goes nowhere and just says allocate to me. Okay, so this gives people a blue button to click. And what that would do, if we find that one down here, oops, excuse me, awaiting review, allocate to me, we're actually going to make it so that whoever clicks that becomes the reviewer. So we'll use the workflow action, set job position to a user, reviewer to current user. Current user means person clicking the button. So we'll do that. And then we'll also do set job holder to the reviewer. As you can see, all these changes we make, they're instantly applicable. So currently this is on a waiting review. I just hit refresh to get my new button to come in. It's on a waiting review held by the team. If we click allocate to me, it's made me the reviewer and it's made me the job holder. So there's a few different ways of ensuring that you always have a job holder. And like I say, it might be a person, specifically give this to Ben. It might be a person from a position. So give this to the preparer, which might be whoever that is. It might be a team. It might be the pool. Okay, let me just look at this and see if I've got any more bits to say. We've looked at the jobs held board on dashboards. We've looked at the jobs. I think we looked at the jobs held widgets. So that's specifically saying to me, these are the two that I need to be doing something on. Okay, next thing, I'm conscious we've got 14 minutes left. The next thing I want to talk about is target dates. Again, another bit of really core functionality in Glide that could easily be overlooked or not used, but which can be super useful. The target dates are the main tool in Glide for helping you to prioritize all work. Obviously deadlines are there as well, but thinking that we don't want to be deadline orientated, we want to be aware of those, but we actually want to define when we should be doing things. Target dates is the go-to tool here. So as a classic example here, awaiting books and records, yeah, I've got 25, but are they just in there and they don't really need my attention, or have they been in there for weeks? And the various target widgets help me understand that. Okay, so here's our sort of top tips for using targets well. First of all, have them automatically generated wherever possible. So again, you just find your step. So you might have one on the creation step there. I've got one there, look. Or when you click your blue buttons, set a target. So have them done automatically. You can, on your job card, fill them in manually. It's worth noting that you can block manual editing per stage if you like, but you can fill them in manually. But of course, as soon as you have to do something manually, I would say people forget. They won't, because you can put in a traffic light to say you must fill in this target, but it's an annoyance for people. So try and limit manual completion of targets to situations where it's impossible to do automatically. So maybe you've got a stage that reflects a meeting with the client and you need to book that meeting in, and that date is only known to you. You could, in theory, set that through the API, but that's not, today's topic. So yeah, other than on situations like that, have them automated. Now, the golden rule with target dates is to ensure there is always one on the job card somewhere. Okay, so there's, generally speaking, there's two approaches you might take. Thinking of, what's this we're looking at? A tax return. Okay. Some people might go what I would say is quite big picture, sort of turnaround style. So, what I mean by that is on job creation, maybe set one to get the info in, and then when the info's in, just set one to finish the return. So you might just see one target date there and one right at the bottom, 2. That's fine. That focuses everyone on your sort of, if you like, overall turnaround aspiration. And it says, like, regardless of what happens, this is how we should be seeing our to-do list organized. Maybe tax return info comes in, we've got 60 calendar days to get it done. And, target dates, what's great about that, if we just go to our personal tax V1, imagine someone walks into reception with their bank statements and their dividend vouchers and what have you, and the receptionist clicks info received. You've got that automated workflow action. So that sets the plus 60 days. And then, automatically, of course. And then whoever's involved, when we've got linked widgets, no matter if you're the director, partner, manager, tax department manager, preparer, whatever, you straight away see it as a plus 60. Okay. And obviously at that point, you're not really worried. And, get into that daily habit of looking at your dashboard. Tomorrow it's plus 59. The day after it's plus 58. Again, we're not really worried. But what can't happen is it won't suddenly become plus 1 or 2 or 3 and we didn't get plenty of advance warning. So that is the great thing about target dates there. The other way of doing it is to be really granular, probably have a target on every stage. And as soon as something happens, set the next one. So maybe this chased phone, I've got a target down here already. I could have that update in my target date to maybe be 7 days later or whatever. When information's received, maybe I have like 3 working days to check it in. When it's checked in, maybe I have 2 days to allocate it. So you can be really granular. And that, of course, just gives you more detail than the earlier approach we talked about. And also, it does also guarantee that if you're saying to people, look, try and do things by the target dates, it does help to have had them set when the most recent thing happened, because, on your one where you've just got 60 days, if your client goes on holiday for 50 days, it's a bit unrealistic to think you're going to get the info in, prepare it, review it, and finalize it in 10. So those dates, depending on how you promote this internally, those dates could become a bit demotivating. And of course, you can manage your historic, you can report upon your turnaround times with the turnaround report just based on actual dates. You don't need the targets to mean that as well. So sometimes the more granular approach works. Crucially, no matter how many targets you have, your upcoming targets widget, and anywhere that we report on this, is reporting on jobs. You know, if you set 10 target dates on job creation, which I don't recommend, I think that's, you know, not the best way of doing it. But if you did, you won't see the job 10 times in here. And that obviously just looks messy and rubbish. The system is always looking at the most urgent target date and calculating the number of days to go or overdue and showing the job once. So it really is a very focused way of looking at it. I don't know if I've said this already, but the golden rule to this working well is to ensure there's always one target date in play on the job card. And what that means is the current stage and any stages further down on the job card, the system is constantly scanning those and picking out the most urgent one. So you've got to make sure there is one somewhere, okay? And the way to do that, a bit like with the job holder we were talking about, is set a target date on job creation. If you set it for the last stage, that's all you have to do. If you set it for like stage 3, when you have a progress button, that means stage 3 is done and you're moving on to a stage that is further down the job card, you've got to set another one. That will keep it in the widget. Okay, so you know, if I had on job creation, if I set a target date to get it started, as soon as I click job started, I need to be setting another one, which I didn't do just there. So, you know, I haven't got this particular system set up optimally. Okay, right. I think we've done target dates justice there. We're coming into the final 8 minutes. I'm going to talk about dashboards. I'm going to really quickly talk about email and SMS, but probably in that one, I'll just highlight where you'll be able to access the webinar from last week, which was all about that. So that's really going to do that more justice. So dashboards then, without a doubt, again, you know, if we're implementing a new customer today, I make the dashboards a really big part of that project. You know, we make sure that they are configured relevant for each team member. We generally think about them as like the directors, the managers, or maybe the managers in this department, team members, or even just specific people. Make sure they're relevant to them and give them more than one. You know, my general approach now is overall summary. Now, this might be set to an overall level or a linked, but I'm using the widgets that are all my workflows. So if I click on the plus here, these ones are coming from the top section, which does not filter by workflow system. So it's all my targets, all my deadlines, all my jobs held, etc., etc., etc. And you could have one that's global overall, so not filtered to linked, and one that's linked. So it could be like overall summary, my portfolio, overall summary, the business, or you've got the office level filter as well, which is sometimes useful. Then give people these widgets, which are looking at particular workflows. And you know what you can do here, of course, is you can have the progress monitor, which is super useful. And then you can have all those widgets that you had on the overall, but you can filter them to this workflow. And again, you could do one that is a filter to overall, one that's set to linked. That's totally fine. You can have like that, my jobs, that all. You know, this is definitely the way to do it. And there's loads of widgets, but really you want the progress view. You want the target view, you want one way or another, or a couple of ways of looking at deadlines. Okay, so this one's like a grid, this one's a list, and you want the jobs held. That to me covers everything. The only exception is if your job is ever held by a team, like admin team or that reviewers team, grab the widget that reflects what that team has. So there is, you know, a global one team widget, jobs held by the team, and then on every single workflow, you'll have team widget, jobs held by the team. That ensures that they're seeing those as well. So definitely that's the way to set up the dashboards. Okay, just 5 minutes to go. I think I'm gonna like not talk about the email and SMS automation, because what I'll do is I'll make sure that's published on our YouTube from last week's webinar imminently by the end of this week. So that's going to cover that off in loads of detail. So just going to use the final 5 minutes just to try and pick on some totally random things that we haven't talked about. First of all, let's shoot in and have a look at workflow actions and just chat about some random ones we haven't looked at just yet. So set job holder we've spoken about, super important. The if empty allows you to ensure it's set to somebody. Set target date, you know, really important. Obviously, email and SMS, that's on the other webinar. Set job position to a user, that's great for where we had that review stage and someone clicked to say, it's in the pool, or rather a team, and we had a button to say, look, it's mine. Send data to a webhook. This is one for sort of like the techie people out there, that you can have a Zapier Zap, or maybe a Power Automate, whatever Microsoft calls it, their things being triggered by a Glide blue button that can do some really cool stuff. Create a job. If you've not seen my webinar on new client onboarding, on our latest template for that, have a look at that, because that makes really big use of the create a job workflow action. Now we sort of guide you through a questionnaire saying, do we need to think about VAT? And you have questions like, no, not applicable, yes, already registered, yes, needs to register. And they will create different jobs. So like the yes needs to register will create an authorization job and a registration job. So when I was talking about the blue buttons earlier, I mentioned have several if they need to do different actions, and that's another good example of that. Okay, the traffic lights, obviously this is all about insisting on and ensuring your data is populated how you expect it to be. Field completed is a good one for those job positions that need manually allocating, and for if you do have a little sort of mini checklist of job fields, like have we done this, you can make them all mandatory at any point. Things like auto job progress, control state, these all get slightly more obscure. I won't go through those in tons of detail. The webhooks, I'd say, is a great one to play with at some point, because you can do some really great stuff. You could have job started that could be populating a Google Sheet and sending an email. Obviously we can do the email anyway, but sending an email through something or other, do lots of stuff. Also a popular webhook usage is posting messages to Slack channels or Teams channels, that sorts of things. Okay, yeah, final thing to mention, what new things coming up around the corner. Very, very, very close now to having our Companies House continual sync ready. Hopefully be getting a message out about that at some point during February. And yeah, then we're sort of just working through continuing to sort of revamp the key screens. So cool. Okay, we're in the final 2 minutes. I should have said at the start, obviously you can use the chat, the questions. If you have any of those, feel free to. I mentioned this before we started recording. Apologies. My Zoom settings have gone a bit mad, and no one got a link to join until I clicked the button literally 2 minutes before. So we've probably got a lot less people in here than what might have been the case if we'd have done that properly. But of course, we'll be sharing the recording, so that will be on our YouTube, Vimeo channels imminently. So if any colleagues missed out, you can easily share that with them. But okay, we've arrived at 1 o'clock, so I'm pleased I got through all the notes I'd put down to go through there. Hope it's been useful. Hope there's loads of ideas if you're an existing Glide user for how you can tweak and improve the sort of level of detail. I think that's probably one common theme here, is just making the dashboards and reports super useful. We don't want people to be looking at it and thinking, this could tell me more. Hopefully what we've looked at today can assist you in doing that. And if you don't use Glide already, hopefully it's just giving you some inspiration for how you might set your workflows up if you do use it in the future. As ever, we've not gone into the nitty-gritty of how to do things here today. So as ever, just reach out to the team, to your account manager, if you need any help with anything, either giving us a call or popping on the blue button down the bottom here in the ask. That is good, because that gets sent to absolutely everyone. So even if some of us are out, you will obviously get a quick answer, or just contact your account manager however you normally would. Cool. Okay, well, I'm going to sit around in here for a couple of minutes just in case there's any questions come in, but I'll stop the recording now. And yeah, so just thanks again, everyone, for coming along. Cheers.